Let's look at government's handling of the pandemic, especially in relation to schools. My guest is the Deputy Chairman, Alliance for Survival of COVID-19 and Beyond, ASCAP, Mr. Shino Odugbemi. He joins us from our Lagos studio. Mr. Shino, welcome to Politics Today.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for having me.
All right, before we talk about how government is handling the pandemic in relation to schools, especially tertiary institutions, ASCAP has described as lukewarm government's attitude to the rising tide of the COVID-19 pandemic and says that the country will face more deaths if certain steps are not taken to reverse this trend. Could you talk about this attitude of government that you question and some of the steps that you feel need to be taken?
First, I want us to really cast our mind back to just last year, the year we left behind, year 2020. There was an instructive mass action, which, when you check the undertone, part of the revelation we had in the course of the mass action was certain snag on the part of the government in the way the palliative was handled. We have several stories. We have stories of government wanting to give out the palliative at a certain time and people taking it upon themselves. So where I'm going is we have at hand a situation that is very dire, a situation that has consequences that will take lives. A situation that we have seen taking lives in those places we call the advanced climes. In America, in the UK, all over the world, there is an alarm. And if you look at our own approach here, I will score it below average. Score it below average is like here we do kick and follow. We don't think ahead of time. We don't anticipate what the consequence of this pandemic that is holding everybody by the jugular. We don't know. Every day we count numbers of death all around the world. And these are to be very instructive to us as a nation. And I feel generally we have scored below average. And I will tell you, just when the pandemic started, you saw a lot of centers springing up where people could go. But in less than 2-3 months, all these things disappeared. People were of the opinion that, in fact, there is this even wrong notion that we have a special immunity, an immunity that has not been tested, an immunity whose the failure of such assumed immunity could lead to several consequences. So here I am saying that we need to up our game as a people. We need to take this thing very seriously. If nations like the US, if nations like the UK are groaning under the effect of this pandemic, then here at home we have to look at ourselves. We have to take a second look. Our medical institutions, in what stage are they?
But some persons will disagree with you on this. Just a second. Some persons will disagree with you on this because we find that the PTF briefs was briefing on a daily basis and now briefs at least twice a week on this. You see the steps taken by the Lagos state government. You see the steps being taken by other state governments as well, setting up isolation centers. And with support from international communities and private companies in Nigeria, some would applaud. In fact, at some point, Nigeria was hailed as properly handling this COVID-19 pandemic, which was responsible for the low deaths recorded. Would you disagree?
I disagree. Let me share this personal experience. At the heat of the pandemic, there was a suspicion of somebody having COVID-19 around my own office. And the decision was that get to the nearest hospital and check yourself. Do the test. And the person tested positive. So there was pandemonium in my office and everybody was like, go and take the test. And I personally, and I'm telling you from personal experience now, I was at Ifako Center samples we are taking. I was there, my sample was taken, and yours sincerely, I've taken the test for 3 months now, and there is no result. This is a personal experience. And if you ask many other Nigerians, they will tell you their experience is not far from what I'm saying. So I see us saying one thing with one side of the mouth and doing something like, and let me also tell you what I experienced there. I experienced the fact that emphasis were placed on those that were traveling abroad. And with with whatever was put on ground, there was focus on Nigerians, people in charge of this, trying to milk this process. Where I'm going is that, yes, you are putting a process on ground, but do we have anybody playing supervisory role on those processes? I've exchanged what was my own personal experience. I've taken the test on COVID-19 for 3 months now from Ifako Center, and the result is yet to see the light of the day. So what are we saying? Where are we going from here?
All right, well, let's look at how government is handling this in relation to reopening of schools now. Experts have said that government must balance the risks of reopening schools against the harms associated with prolonged closure. Now there are talks of postponement or review of the planned 18th of January date. How do you propose that government goes about the balance in this case?
We are at a point when we have to be more rational, more proactive, and less deceptive. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Before anyone can start beating his chest on the resumption date, the first question we should be asking is, how prepared are we? What are those things on ground in all the institutions? Are the protocols, are we sure the protocols will be observed? Are there anything in place? I think what we should be doing, what parents should be doing, what civil society organizations should be doing is get to those institutions and let us all ensure that those things are there. And let me also tell you this. I attended a Nigerian university. I shared an hall. In my hall, the room was meant for 2 people, originally built for 2 people. And in my own days, 4 people shared a room that was meant for 2. That was 30 years ago. If you go back to those facilities now, what you may probably see is 8 or 10 people sharing a facility meant for 2. So before we really, because we need to balance this up. Yes, our children are at home, losing time. But the other side of the coin is, are we willing to lose these children? If no, our emphasis should be, we get down to the field now, we get down to the institutions now, and ensure that all those facilities are there before we start stamping our feet. I as a person and as a parent want to keep my kids at home until it is certain, because we are in a climate where we do a lot of self-patronage. We politicize almost everything. And here we have at our hands a situation that cannot be politicized. All we need to do before we say 18th of these people should go back to school is to also ascertain that all those precautionary facilities are there. Except for that, if we are not sure of that, in my own opinion, I think our world should stay alive at home rather than getting down to the institution to go and meet their Waterloo there.
Some have also questioned why facilities have not been put in place to, at least to an extent, get students to embark on e-learning. E-learning has been something that many schools, some schools across the world have been adopting. In fact, our neighbors Kenya here, with about 17% internet usage, or user population, are employing e-learning. Do you think that Nigeria is ready for that, considering the population issue with hostels that you had mentioned?
Yeah, we started our assessment by saying how much are we prepared? How much is the government doing? How much are we prepared for this? And this question answers the first question. By now, those that are contemplating on resumption dates should also tell us that we have set machineries in place, and the feedback we are having is that everything is set. You can't stay in your house. You don't stay in the comfort of your offices and decree resumption under this pandemic. We need to. And I'm also putting this to civil society all around us. Get down to these institutions and ensure that. Then, on this question of e-learning, the whole lockdown started March last year, almost a year now. You now ask yourself, what are our ministry and agencies in charge of education? What have they put together in terms of e-learning? And if you ask me, there's nothing to show for it. And back to the first question, it defines our readiness, it defines our seriousness as far as this pandemic is concerned. A year is enough for the agencies concerned, for the ministries concerned, to put together these e-learning facilities. And we need to also realize too, that we live in an environment where even availability of power that is most essential to this e-learning thing is in the air. You don't have it. So all this defines our seriousness, and I think that we have two options: to push our words into the uncertainty, into those areas where we have not done much, or we keep them alive in our houses.
Well, let's talk about the issue of the lack of preparedness. Now, some would say that the universities themselves will take a blame in this because maybe they needed to push the government in preparation or anticipation of a resumption. But it would seem that that's not the case. We had the unions go on strike, and there's one looming right now. But no one has mentioned the issue of e-learning in the light of this pandemic.
Yeah, the university does not drive itself. The university, there are agencies of government that oversees what goes in the university. So, hand in hand with the authorities of the universities and these agencies, what is expected is a combined effort to ensure, because there is no doubt we are in a very special time. You understand? This time requires all stakeholders, parents, agencies of government, the institutions, to look at how do we get out of this mess? So it's not an error.
Okay.
It's either the government drives us or we drive the government. So much as
very well,
we put blames
Mr.
on the doorstep of the government, we also, because the state...
All right, Mr. Odugbemi, let's take a break here. We'll be back. When we come back, I'll let you conclude your thoughts. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Politics Today. My guest is Mr. Odugbemi. He is the Secretary General of ASCAB, and he's joined from our Lagos studio. Mr. Odugbemi, let's talk about the risks of keeping students at home now, because it would seem that we're not prepared from what you've said and considering the review that's in place now. What's the risk of keeping students at home at this time?
The risk also is there. They are losing time, but there is also this argument. Keeping them at home does not give them 100% protection. Because the truth is that even their parents will go out. It does not prevent them from contacting, because the parents will go out, and in going out, they may be, but it minimizes the danger than throwing them to an environment where only God knows what is going on. Let me go to our universities and ask yourself, are these environment, are they conscious? In fact, even on our streets, when you get to the street, people are not, there are still people in this country who believe that this thing is a farce, that the COVID-19 thing is, and this is a serious danger. So keeping the wards at home is not a complete immunity or a complete, you are not isolating them completely from it, but it minimizes the risk, in my own opinion, than throwing them out into campuses, into schools where we have not assessed their readiness and we have not assessed the precautionary measures put in place for the students to come in. So there are two sides to this argument. You keep them at home, they are not fully immune. You send them out, but one is a greater risk than the other. And that's my opinion.
Do you think that the issue of vaccines, if they come in, would be a solution? I understand that ASCAP has a different position on this issue of vaccines. You have said that it would seem that when the vaccines come in, they will not go to the right people, even though the government has said that the frontline health workers will be the first to take it.
We are tempted to look at things from the Nigerian perspective. When it comes in, it goes into one hand, it may most likely go into wrong hand, then people may want to trade with it. There may be preference for the high and mighty, this and this. But all these things are things we should anticipate early enough and put in place machineries to ensure that we scale the hurdle. Because the Nigerian factor will come into play when the vaccine comes in. You understand? There will be special preference. In fact, health officers, like we have witnessed, like I have witnessed, may want to find a way of commercializing one thing or the other. But then, once this monster steer is dead, it is the duty of all of us, civil society, religious organizations, to ensure that we turn ourselves into cells of monitoring group. We don't just throw things out like that. We all, because we are like in a war situation where all hands must be on deck.
Odugbemi, if I may come in here, very big thank you to my guest in our Lagos studio, Mr. Shina Odugbemi from ASCAP, the Deputy Chair ASCAP. Thank you very much for coming on Politics Today.
Thanks for having me.